Jurors and alternates have returned. Mr. Durst is present with Mr. Chesnoff and Mr. DeGuerin. For the people, we have Mr. Miata, Mr. Henderson, Mr. Balian, Mr. Milius, and Mr. Lewin. Mr. Lewin, or maybe I should turn to Mr. Milius to ask if the people are going, if the people rest.
Yes, Your Honor. The people rest.
All right, people rest. Defense.
May I plug this in, Your Honor? I apologize.
Yes.
Oh, thanks.
When they arrest you, does that mean he doesn't get to interrupt me anymore?
Now it's time for the defense to call their first witness. Mr. Chesnoff, you may call your first witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to call Dr. Elizabeth Loftus to the stand, please.
Remain standing, raise your right hand and be sworn. Do you solemnly state that the testimony you may give in the cause now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Please be seated. Please state and spell your first and last name.
My name is Elizabeth Loftus, and Elizabeth is Elizabeth. Loftus is Loftus.
Thank you.
All right, and though you project beautifully like a professor would, you may speak right into that microphone and that will project you even farther.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Dr. Loftus, how are you employed?
I am a professor at the University of California, Irvine.
And what title do you hold as professor at UC Irvine?
Well, my technical title is Distinguished Professor.
Your Honor, I previously provided your clerk with a copy of Dr. Loftus's curriculum vitae, her CV, and asked it to be marked next in order, Your Honor.
Where are we with the defense exhibits?
F like Frank, will be the next alphabet.
Thank you, Your Honor.
F.
Thank you, Ms. Clerk. What does a distinguished professor mean?
When I was recruited by UC Irvine, it was an honor to be offered a distinguished professor. It is the top ranked professor in the University of California system. I think possibly about 1% of the faculty held that title. Now it's 19 or 20 years later. It may be somewhat larger than that, and it's sometimes offered to people who are continuing to advance after they've already been through all the advancement steps. So sometimes people get it for longevity, but back when I was hired, it was a big honor.
Doctor, so that it's no mystery, you were hired by the defense to assist us, correct?
Yes.
And you were paid for what, approximately 77 hours of work?
Yes.
And so the jury knows you were paid a sum of approximately $46,000, correct?
Well, I received approximately $46,000. I think it was $46,200 for the last year and a half of work that I have done on this case.
When did you start working, Doc?
I started working on this case in February 2020.
And you were hired by the defense counsel, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Where'd you get your education, Doctor?
Starting with college, I went to UCLA as an undergraduate. I majored in mathematics and psychology. I had a double major. I graduated in 1966. And then from UCLA, I went to Stanford for graduate school and received my master's degree in psychology in 1967, followed by a PhD in psychology, and that was awarded in 1970.
Have you received any honorary degrees?
I have, yes.
Could you describe where from to the jury, please?
Oh, I have about 7 honorary doctorates from different universities. Some of them are in the United States. but also one from the University of London, Goldsmiths in England, one from Portsmouth in England, one from the University of Leiden, which is one of the top universities in the Netherlands, one from Haifa University in Israel, one from the University of Oslo in Norway, and then there's one more that has been offered to me, but because of COVID, I have not been able to go to Australia to accept it and speak at the commencement. I'm hoping that there'll be a completion of that, and that is Australian National University, ANU, which is one of the top universities in Australia.
Have you received any grants from foundations for your research or for your scholarship?
Well, over my career, I've had grants from sometimes from foundations or from the National Science Foundation or the National Institute of Mental Health, or other agencies that support my scientific work in the area of human memory.
And I probably failed to ask, but how would you define your area of expertise?
Well, I was trained in psychology. My specialty is human memory. And I have appointments at UC Irvine in the psychology department, in a criminology department, and also in the School of Law.
Have you worked for or consulted with government agencies?
I have, yes.
Could you describe some of that, please?
I've done consulting or of some sort for the Department of Justice, the Secret Service, the FBI, the IRS.
Wait a minute. You did work for the IRS?
Well, actually, that was on the subject of why people are cheating on their taxes and what the government can do about it. So it was a little bit different from the usual memory and interviewing consulting that I'm usually doing with the other agencies.
Did you also work for the National Center for Health Statistics?
Yes.
Can you describe what you did for them?
Oh, well, that was on trying to help them do better surveys of crime victimization. I believe that's what we were doing. That was quite a while ago. So.
Have you consulted for attorneys and other members of the legal profession in other countries?
Yes.
Can you describe some of those places and what you did?
Well, of course, most of the consulting or testifying, whatever, is with attorneys in the United States, but I've testified a number of times in Canada, twice in South Korea, consulted with attorneys in Ireland, consulted in Portugal, consulted and testified in Israel once.
So in the United States, you've consulted with defense lawyers, correct? Criminal defense lawyers?
Many times, yes.
And have you ever consulted with the prosecution?
I have consulted with the prosecution about 5 or 6 times, but actually only testified once, called by the prosecution, and that was a case in Wisconsin some years ago.
But when you're consulting for criminal defendants, it's because you are talking about the evidence that's being presented against them by a prosecutor, correct?
Well, that's more typically what is happening, and it would be memory evidence of some sort.
And you've testified on behalf of some well-known defendants before? Is that fair?
I have, yes.
And you testified on behalf of public defenders, is that right?
Yes.
And here in Los Angeles?
Many times, yes.
And when you testify, you get hired to talk about your area of expertise, correct?
Yes, that's...
But you're not making a judgment about the person that you're testifying. That's up to a jury, right?
Well, I don't say whether somebody's guilty or not guilty, only analyze some of the memory issues in the case.
How long have you been engaged in the study of memory?
I started doing studies of memory when I was still in graduate school, so that that would have been in the late 1960s. So I've been studying memory for more than 50 years.
Approximately how many times have you been published on the subject of memory?
Well, I published more than 20 books, many of which are about the subject of memory, and maybe more than 600 scientific articles and chapters, and the majority of those are on the subject of memory, memory distortion, a lot of the experimental work that I and my laboratory have conducted.
Have you received any honors and awards for this work?
Many, yes.
Can you describe some of them, please?
Well, I guess the most prestigious honor, it won't be too much of a brag, is I was elected to the United States National Academy of Sciences, which is probably the most prestigious thing that can happen to an American scientist in a field that doesn't have a Nobel Prize. And that happened, that election was maybe around 2004 or so. But I've been awarded the two top prizes of the Association for Psychological Science, Lifetime Achievement Awards. I just this week was given the Lifetime Achievement Award from the International Union of Psychologists. This is an international group. Last year I won the Suppies Award from the American Philosophical Society.
In 2009, did you receive an award from the American Psychology Law Society?
Yes, I received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the American Psychology Law Society. Maybe that was 10 years ago or so.
And when you say you were elected to the National Academy of Science, that was in 2004?
Approximately, yes.
Is there a periodical called the Review of General Psychology?
Yes.
Or could you describe to the jury what that is?
The Review of General Psychology is a publication, peer-reviewed publication that publishes articles that would be of general interest to psychologists.
Did they at one time publish a list of the 100 most eminent psychologists in the 20th century?
They did, yes.
And how do you remember that?
Well, I remember that because after they published that list of the 100 most eminent psychologists of the 20th century, I think that helped me get the job offer from UC Irvine.
And were you were listed then?
I was, yes.
And were you the highest listed woman in that?
I was number 58, and that was the highest ranked woman on the list. But the top of the list were people like Freud, Skinner, Piaget, a number of now deceased males.
In 2010, were you awarded the Howard Crosby Warren Medal?
Yes, I was. That was another award, yes.
Do you remember, and that's an award that goes back to 1904, is that correct?
Well, that's when that organization started, the one that gave that award, yes.
And can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what that award was for?
That was the Society of Experimental Psychologists. It's like a respected group of experimental psychologists, people who do scientific research in psychology as opposed to practicing clinical psychologists that treat patients. And so that was one of the awards of that organization.
In 2013, did you receive the Gold Medal for Life Achievement for extraordinary contributions to our understanding of memory during the past 40 years?
Yes, I can't remember which organization gave me that one, but one did.
Would it refresh your recollection if I told you?
If I had my CV in front of me, I could look it up. But
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you.
thank you.
You can keep that.
Could you remind me of the date of that award?
2013, please.
2013. Oh, yes, that was the American Psychological Foundation that gave me that award.
And it was for?
Well, in the certificate, it said extraordinary contributions to our understanding of memory during the past 40 years that are remarkable for their creativity and impact.
In 2021, you were awarded the International Union of Psychological Science Lifetime Career Award.
Yes, I think I might have mentioned that one
Okay, I'm
already,
sorry.
but yes, yes.
My memory,
Yeah, short-term memory.
short-term memory. Are you on any editorial boards?
I am, yes.
Could you describe those to the jury?
Scientific journals typically have an editor and an editorial board. And members of the editorial board typically review manuscripts that are submitted to the journal for publication. They review them for their scientific merit, the soundness of the contribution, the importance of the work, and they then make recommendations to the editor about which of these manuscripts should be published in the journal and which should be not published. So as a member of a number of editorial boards, I serve in that role for the profession in evaluating prospective manuscripts and making those recommendations.
Are you the president of any professional or scientific organization?
Well, I was the president of a number of organizations. So if I was a president of the Association for Psychological Science. That's the organization in psychology primarily for academic research psychologists. It now has maybe 30,000 members. I was president in maybe 1998. I was president of the Western Psychological Association, which is an organization that covers the western region of the United States, so that's California and Oregon and Washington, maybe Hawaii, and possibly some other states. I was twice president of that organization, and then I was also president of the American Psychology Law Society.
Have you written a book called Human Memory, The Processing of Information?
That's one of the books that I published. That's basically a textbook for college courses in the area of human memory.
And it's used in colleges throughout the United States?
Well, it was. They're now newer books, but...
Okay. Did you write a book called Cognitive Processes?
Yes, that's basically I co-authored that textbook, and it's basically for a college textbook for courses in cognitive psychology.
Have your books been translated into other languages?
Many of them have, yes.
Did you write an article? Have you written articles on the subject of memory?
Hundreds and hundreds of articles, yes.
In scientific journals?
Scientific journals, peer-reviewed journals, book chapters.
Explain what a peer-reviewed journal is, please.
Well, a peer-reviewed journal is a journal that subjects the proposed submission to the review process that I described already. So it means that other scientists have evaluated the work and decided that it was worthy of publication.
Let me ask you this, doctor. If 6 to 8 people are interrogated by the same person and they say the same thing, can that still indicate a false memory?
It can if those 6 to 8 people are subjected to the same maybe problematic interviewing or post-event suggestion, some kind of suggestive information. They might all end up believing something that isn't accurate.
If false information is incorporated into a question, can the person adopt it into their memory?
Absolutely, yes.
Can you explain how that works?
Well, that's the kind of thing that we've actually done in some of my experiments. We incorporate false information into a question, and we look to see what people do with that suggestive question. So you show people, say, a simulated accident where a car goes through a yield sign before the accident and ask a leading question like, did another car pass the red car when it was at the intersection with the stop sign, that can cause many people to now believe and remember they saw a stop sign instead of a yield sign. That's just one experimental example of how a question that has embedded in it some misinformation can be adopted by people.
Doctor, is the defendant's exhibit F that I provided you a true and correct copy of your curriculum vitae?
Yes, this is a copy, I just looked at the last page, updated July 2021.
So that's your most recent resume, correct?
Yes.
Your Honor, we've moved to introduce the doctor's curriculum vitae into evidence. We provided a copy to Mr. Lewin.
I don't believe that the resume would be,
We
should be marked, not moved in.
Don't introduce it now, you may refer to it.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, will the court, at this point in time, designate the doctor as an expert witness, or do you prefer?
Yes, you've established qualifications as an expert, and you may examine her as such.
Thank you.
No objection by the people who own.
Thank you.
In 2008, did you publish an article called Emotional Content of True and False Memories?
Yes, I co-authored that article with a former PhD student, now professor herself.
And would you please tell the jury the nature of that study?
What this article was about, just to give a speck of background, in addition to changing people's memories for the details of an event that might have occurred, we've also done quite a bit of work where we plant entirely false memories into someone's mind for things that didn't happen. So we've done studies where we plant a false memory that you were, as a child, lost in a shopping mall and frightened and crying, or other investigators planted a false memory you were attacked by a vicious animal, or as a teenager you committed a crime and it was serious and the police even came to investigate. What this particular study that you're asking me about is looking at is whether once we plant these false memories in people's minds, are they as emotional about those false memories as they might be about true memories. And what we showed is that people can be just as emotional about their false memories as they are about true memories. So emotion is no guarantee that you're dealing with an authentic memory.
What can cause someone to have an inflated confidence in their memory?
Well, confidence inflation is something that has been examined in a number of studies in this field. And often you see this, you can ask people once they've given you a memory report, how confident are you in what you're saying? And they may give a confidence level. They may say it in words like I'm pretty sure, or I'm very sure, or I'm quite certain, whatever the words are. Or they might say, give you a number on a scale from 1 to 10, you know, I give it a 9 or whatever, or I give it a 6. If you then give people feedback about their memory report, it can artificially inflate their confidence. So if you say, other people feel the same way, or we have other evidence that that's true, somebody who once said, I'm pretty sure, can now say, I'm very sure. That's confidence inflation. And there have been a number of studies showing this kind of confidence inflation.
If someone insists that they are absolutely sure that their memory is correct, can that alone provide certainty that their memory is in fact correct?
No, it doesn't provide certainty. People can be quite certain about things that aren't accurate. Confidence can sometimes, if it's a really clean situation, can sometimes be associated with an accurate memory. But the problem is that once you introduce lots of suggestive information, leading questions, other kinds of biased information, it can make people very, very certain but wrong.
Can you explain to the jury through studies, or your studies, how people can have false memories?
Generally, people have false memories. They can have false memories because they're exposed to some kind of external information. They have a conversation with somebody else who utters something that's wrong. They get asked questions by somebody who's got a theory about what might have happened or could have happened and maybe communicates information even inadvertently. They can get false memories when they're exposed to media coverage that contains some misinformation of some sort. All of these situations provide an opportunity for new information to become available to a person and cause a supplementation or even an alteration, a contamination, a distortion in somebody's memory.
So memories can be changed by new external information that people encounter. So by what they read, see on TV, movies, anecdotes, suggestive questions, leading questions.
Well, those are a few examples, some of which I mentioned, and then you added movies. People can be have their memories affected by movies.
What does it mean when people contaminate their own memory?
Oh, well, contaminate your own memory. I've talked about the situation where there is external suggestion of some sort. The conversations with other people, interrogations by somebody maybe who's got a theory or a hypothesis, exposure to media coverage. This is external suggestion that a person encounters. But people can contaminate their own memory. What we sometimes do is we can draw inferences about what could have happened, what might have happened, and those inferences can kind of solidify and start to feel as if they're memories. And that is sometimes referred to as auto-suggestion.
Can a person's bias impact their memory?
Yes. Well, when you ask me about bias, I'm thinking of studies, some recent, some very recent, that show that if the external suggestion fits with your prior biases or your prior beliefs, people are more likely to accept it and get contaminated by it. And one example, and this is an example in some of the work that I co-authored, is we presented some photographs to people as if they were real news, public events involving politicians. So, for example, one of them shows our former President Obama shaking the hand of the former president of Iran. And this never happened. It was a doctored photograph, but if you present it to people as if it's in the news and you ask people, remember seeing this? A lot of people will say, oh yeah, I remember when that was in the news. They'll think they have a memory of it. And whether they fall for this suggestion depends on their prior disposition. So if they're a conservative Republican, they're more likely to fall for a suggestive photograph that makes the Democrat Obama look bad. And conversely, those conservative Republicans are somewhat less likely to fall for a doctored photograph, a suggestive photograph that makes say the former President Bush look bad. So this is an example in the literature of how your prior beliefs about something can affect the likelihood that you'll accept this suggestive information and start to feel as if it is your memory.
Earlier I asked you if you testified in court before, and you said you had. You've testified for well-to-do clients, correct?
Some of them, yes.
Some of them well-known, correct?
Yes.
And you've also testified, as you said earlier, for public defenders or done pro bono work, correct?
Over my career, yeah, there are many public defenders in the past and some pro bono cases.
Have you lectured to public defender groups, for example?
Many times, but also to prosecutors and other members of the legal profession.
So that people could learn about memory?
Well,
Correct?
that's the hope, yes.
You met with myself and some of my colleagues, correct, to prepare?
Yes, I guess we've met in person a couple of times, and then also had some meetings over Zoom or Skype or whatever platform because of COVID.
Did you speak to the prosecutor in this case, Doctor?
No.
Did you explain why?
Well, in my 50 years of doing this, I don't remember a time when I spoke to the prosecutor, and I wasn't quite sure, but it just seemed like it would be a better idea for communication to happen in front of a judge who might be able to, oversee and monitor that communication.
Mr. Lewin tried to talk to you, though, didn't he?
He did. He made some requests through you or the defense attorneys that, yes.
Please describe some of the things that you did to prepare for your testimony in this case, without being specific as to the content.
Starting back in February of 2020, I began receiving materials. I reviewed interviews, I reviewed sometimes court testimony, I watched videos of court testimony, I read transcripts of court testimony, I reviewed a couple of, a fictionalized movie that was relevant to this case, and All Good Things. This is, back a year ago or so when I was beginning my work. I reviewed the docudrama, the Jinx. I reviewed New York Times and other media coverage. I watched some of the trial testimony on YouTube.
And you began working prior to the time our trial was interrupted because of COVID, is that right?
Well, I was working quite a bit starting in February 2020, and then when the trial stopped, there wasn't too much to do until it picked up again this year.
You have a busy schedule. Do you also teach and give other lectures? You just don't testify in court, is that right?
No, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have a full-time job. I mean, I have a regular faculty position at UC Irvine, which involves teaching, research. I run my laboratory and service, and then I lecture, I don't know, maybe 10 times a year to different organizations, and write books and articles, mentor students, do consulting sometimes for agencies or corporations.
Is there a commonly accepted understanding of how memory works?
Well, there is a common understanding of how memory works. Commonly, at least amongst the scientists who work in this field, it does not work like a recording device. We don't just record the event and then play it back later. The process is a whole lot more complex. And, well, Your Honor, I don't know, it might be helpful for the jury if I could just illustrate this with a diagram, if that wouldn't be too much trouble.
Do you want to supply?
I think it's available. It's up here somewhere. I was told. Mystery to me. Ah. We're going old school here with Judge.
Yep.
There you go, Judge.
I think
Not a
we
whole.
want them to face the jury.
Huh?
Point towards the jury. Towards the jury.
Yeah, sorry. Habib, I'm like you. Yeah. No skills.
Not try the other way. Horizontal.
That's why you're a professor.
It's a clip. I think on top of the clip, we need a clip.
Oh, it is?
The top. There we go. There you go.
Oh, okay.
Good. Everybody see? Okay, thank you, Your Honor. Thank you.
Should I continue?
Yes, please. Your Honor, may I move over here?
What would you like to do?
May I move over to watch?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we typically divide the memory process into 3 major stages. The first stage is acquisition. This is a period of time where some event or key events occurs. That's the first phase of the process. Afterwards, we enter a new phase. It's called the retention phase. So the key event is over, and the exhibit is collapsing.
I think perhaps it should be, I'm a little concerned about that, the angle of our camera. All right? I think
Yes.
that's pretty
So-
important. So let's, if this were moved closer to the bench,
I understand that.
that would give me a lot more confidence.
I appreciate it, Your Honor. How about if we put it up here?
That would be
Arthur,
wonderful.
why don't you come down this way? I should have worked on this before we started here.
What could go wrong?
You want, Dave, you want some gaffing tape and try taping it to the wall?
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. You have some?
Try to get some.
Or I can do this. Here.
All right, you okay.
I'm
Okay.
sorry.
A little higher, Dave. Perfect. There we go.
Okay, now let's see
You
what
want,
you're
you want to take approach?
Yes.
Do you need more than 1 page or no?
Don't
Well,
you think
hopefully
this-
not.
Okay,
Do you
you
think
just
this
rip the page
won't
off.
work? Can't we connect it? Maybe tape to the frame? To the frame?
Yeah, yeah, we can do that, yeah.
There's definitely a joke about lawyers and psychologists and how many it takes to. I don't know what it is, but there's one out there.
Okay.
Just need one page, right?
I'll make it work.
Hold on, sorry. All right.
Your Honor, we're just warning you, Mr. Bailey is
Right on
by.
it, right? So
Oh, yeah, I can't be on this.
He's by one of your TVs, Your Honor. We take no
Put it
responsibility.
right here, Your Honor. This tape is non-destructive. It will come off.
I'm concerned about our flag here and being able to see past it. No, I don't want to move the flag. Okay,
Look, right.
No.
Got it.
Can you put the cardboard here?
Go ahead.
Put the cardboard up here and then put that back over the cardboard. Stick it back to the.
Want to try horizontal, and I'll start over?
Start over with the fresh one. When you take the whole thing up to there. Put it on the frame. The frame isn't working.
No, put it up there.
Put it horizontal. Put it vertical, like she was. We're going to tape it over the top so that it hangs from the frame. We're going to get this. It's right there.
Here.
Yeah, and I appreciate the restaurant open. I mean, not that. I was trying to catch this when I did.
Duct tape solves every problem.
So far, so good. Go one more, please.
There you go.
Thanks for your patience.
I'll sit, I think, so I don't block the view, but Acquisition is when some event occurs. The next phase is retention. So time is passing after some key event happens. The final stage that's important is called retrieval. And our job then is, by retrieval we mean somebody answers questions about an event, tries to tell in their own words what happened. There can be all different, testifies in court, different acts of retrieval. Our job then, as scientists who work on memory, is to identify the factors that come into play at each of these 3 stages that affect the accuracy of somebody's memory.
Do you need the chart some more? Or?
Well, I might, because to illustrate something, so let's leave it for...
Can this analysis of memory apply to hearing and audio memories as well as visual?
Well, yes, the event itself could be something like a crime or an accident, where a lot of information is visual. It could be a conversation. It could be a story somebody either hears or reads.
And what is post-event information?
That's something that involves the retention stage. So again, retention is a period of time after some key event is over. And I think many people would agree that, without having a PhD, that the longer that retention interval, the less good the memory is going to be. And in fact, we have studied this, and if I were to plot how good memory is as a function of the length of this retention interval, so time is passing, you can expect to see a forgetting curve. It might look something like that. Memory fades over time. But what's not so much a matter of common knowledge is, as this memory is fading, as this retention interval is getting longer and longer, as the memory is getting weaker, it becomes more and more vulnerable to what you're asking about, which is post-event information, or we sometimes just call it PEI. So post-event information, particularly if it's misleading information, is going to more readily negatively affect the memory after a long period has passed than after a short period.
And some of that post-event information is the things you described earlier, like a movie, a TV show, a magazine article, a newspaper article?
Right. In our experiments, we've had people, get post-event information from conversations with other people, or from media coverage, or from being asked leading questions. All of these can provide an opportunity for new ideas and information to enter somebody's memory and affect then what they retrieve.
Is memory retrieval always done by questioning?
No, sometimes people retrieve information by just telling in their own words what happened.
What about the idea that a memory that brings up strong emotions must be true or accurate?
Well, as I think I indicated earlier in my testimony, that even false memories can be felt and with a lot of emotion, and emotion is no guarantee that you're dealing with a true memory.
The retrieval can be affected by questioning. That is, a question that's leading or suggestive that may affect how the memory comes forward in retrieval.
Yes, now that's an important factor at retrieval. How do you ask the question? So if the questions that are asked are leading in some way or biased in some way, that can affect the accuracy of retrieval. But what's also important to realize is that people are often retrieving something more than once. So you have a retrieval here, but then maybe more time passes, and you have a new act of retrieval, where they try to retrieve again. And if you ask a leading question or expose people to suggestive information at an earlier time, then it can affect what they say later on.
Can the circumstances of the questioning also impact how a person's memory responds to the questions?
Well, I'm not quite sure what you're thinking of when you ask me about the circumstances.
Well, if you're in a room with 3 or 4 different people and you're being asked questions, can that affect the retrieval process?
Actually, I'm trying to think, I can't say that I can think of a study that would be an excellent study to do, whether somebody is more likely to kind of be affected if there's one person or more than one person in the room, but I don't know of a study that has demonstrated that.
Okay. If the memory is triggered by some event, say newspaper coverage or a movie, the content of that event may affect how the memory is retrieved. Is that fair?
Yes, the post-event information that might get introduced during the retention interval or during the asking of a leading question can affect what people subsequently remember. People incorporate that kind of information into memory, and it can cause, as I said, it can add to their memory or even change their memory.
If a memory is vivid with lots of details, have the studies shown that it must be true?
No, even false memories can be and are expressed with quite a bit of detail. So when we plant false memories that you were lost in a shopping mall, or frightened by a vicious animal, or committed a crime as a teenager, that's a Canadian study. People are quite detailed about these memories that are completely false.
What about the suggestion that memory can improve or be enhanced as time goes by?
That basically kind of goes against just about everything we know about memory and the forgetting curve. Basically, memory is weakening over time. It is true that people can remind you of something that you haven't thought about in a long time. That happens, and you just have to go to a high school reunion. You can experience that for yourself, but mostly memories are fading.
Is it true, or is it the case that the mind records an event fully and stores all of the information somewhere, and you can go back and if you try hard enough, retrieve it?
I don't think that's true. Memory doesn't record everything. There's no evidence, there's no good evidence that it really does.
There's no video camera or tape recorder in your brain.
No, it works a little bit more like a Wikipedia page. I mean, you can go in there and edit it, but so can other people.
If you remember a detail or of some event one way for 15 or 20 years or 30 years, can you go back and say, well, actually, I have a different memory of that very fact or event, and the memory that you now have is a better memory?
Generally speaking, the memories are more likely to be accurate if it's soon after the event itself rather than later. So if somebody has held on to a memory for a very long time and then suddenly says that they have a different memory, it would be a little suspicious.
What about the concept that memories can be implanted or altered by suggestion? Explain to the jury the impact of that, please.
Well, sometimes people have made the claim that memories can't be planted or altered, but all the work that I and the colleagues who do the similar kinds of studies have been doing over these last number of decades shows that you can alter memory for the details of an event. You can add new details that may not be true, and you can plant entirely false memories into the minds of otherwise ordinary, healthy people. So just because somebody tells you something that isn't accurate, in no way means that they're deliberately lying. They can honestly believe in what they're saying.
And would you describe suggestion by a third party as a problem with actual memory? Is that what the studies show?
Well, if you have suggestive post-event information and then somebody says, okay, yeah, I agree with that, the potential is there that it's the suggestion that led to the construction of a memory, and you just don't know if it's authentic or not.
So we've been talking about suggestion. The suggestion that can, as you've indicated, create a false memory or implant a memory, does it have to be intentional or can it be inadvertent?
It definitely does not have to be intentional. And I think in many situations, people sometimes supply suggestion unwittingly, unintentionally. They may honestly believe in what they're saying, or they may, slip and say something, misleading because they believe it, and they aren't deliberately trying to plant a false memory. But if they utter something false after some event is over, it's got the potential to contaminate what a witness recalls.
Can memories be created by a person without outside suggestion?
Yes, I already testified about autosuggestion. Your own inferences and thoughts can act like external suggestion, and you can alter your own memories.
Your Honor, this would be a good time to break.
Then let's break. Thank you. Doctor, I'm going to order you to come back tomorrow at 9 o'clock and do not converse with any other witness in the case. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we're returning tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Do not converse among yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with this case. Do not form or express any opinion on the case, and we'll return tomorrow at 9 o'clock.
Sheriff, before the jury's excused, may I approach with counsel briefly?
Before the jury's excused? Well, hold on for a second. Let's see what this is about. All right, Mr. Lewin reminded me of something I agreed to do, and it's important that I do it now. Let's see. Just a moment. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Durst, this pertains to the interview of Mr. Durst by Mr. Lewin. Mr. Durst was advised of his rights and agreed to speak with Mr. Lewin during the March 15, 2015 New Orleans interview. There was nothing illegal, unprofessional, or unethical about Mr. Lewin's conducting the interview. It was important that I tell you close in time to hearing that statement by the defendant and close to the time where you heard about that interview. So with that, I will send you on your way until tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. There are transcripts that could be collected. Shall we collect them? I think it's best that we collect them now, if the people will collect them from the jurors as they exit.
Should happen to exhibit now.
Oh. Department, where's my, 1 is adjourned.